Cue, yeah. Say cue the angels.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm sure
Wow.
that's what's going to be over my shoulder.
Yeah. Wow, must be a good day in the Phelan household. Got the Lord visiting.
It is 71 degrees and sunny in good old Grosse Pointe Farms, Michigan.
All right, so I sent you a couple of pictures and you
You
gave the response of haha on the iPhone messages. And so I sent you two images that I'm going through drawers here. I'm still unpacking, Cormac. I moved in at the end of January. It is now near the end of August, so it is going on 6 months right now. Still unpacking. And I pulled two images out of this drawer. I haven't seen these images in 25 plus years, probably. I don't know. When did I graduate? Like 25 years ago. And I said, this was my 3D modeling skills circa 1995. And your response
Yes.
was, haha.
Haha.
Okay, so
It was more because
is that okay? The before, because maybe we could show these images somehow. But
yeah.
is the response like, this is the lamest mod? Like, okay, so if you think
Well,
when
first of
I
all,
made a 3D model in 1995, think of the software, think of the computers, think of how that we modeled everything in
that
wireframe, right?
so that
Compared
that
to
was
what
the
we make
laugh.
now, like we actually make
But
like
see,
rectangles now, right? As architects,
but exactly.
we make
But
dumb rectangles.
the haha was you were using 3D software in 1995. I was making chipboard models in 1995.
I was too, but yeah.
But I mean, like your 3D models were digital 3D models. And even though we did have access to in the studios, this was before we transitioned to PCs. We were on Macs and we were using Form Z.
Yeah, that model that you saw was in Form Z on the Mac in the Mac lab
yeah,
at school. Probably, well, I might have been on my personal Mac. I can't remember.
Well, you actually still use Form Z on occasion.
Well, no, it's been a while, but yeah, I mean, it hasn't been that long. Not as long as you, for sure.
Yeah, exactly. Because I think that 95 Studio might have been the first and last time I'd ever used Form Z.
Wow.
But here's the kicker, and here's kind of like the thinking behind the haha was more as haha, you were allowed to do it.
Allowed to.
We were actually we were discouraged.
I was talking to somebody today
from getting too far into computing.
Yeah, right. That's
at an early stage of. I mean, because remember now. I mean, this was the dawn of our changing of hand drawings, hand drafting, and stuff to really making that switch to computers. And there was still, because I worked in a firm. I think it was 94. I was working for a firm as a summer intern after my second year. And yeah, so it was after my second year. And they basically said so we had two drafts that were using AutoCAD. And of course the big massive digitizers and all of that other stuff. And everybody else was still doing everything by hand.
Mm-hmm.
And the people who were doing it with the computer would scoff at the people who were still doing it by hand, and the people who were doing it by hand were scoffing at the people who were doing it in the computer. And we were at that stage of evolution in architecture where everybody was still worried about, there was we want to call them the Luddites, the people who wanted to hold on to the tradition of hand drawing. But I mean, since it was so prevalent at the time, it was more of just like, oh, this new stuff it's just a fad. It's not gonna. Yeah. I remember. So thinking about that studio with that software,
mm-hmm.
What kind of plotter did you all have? Did you have a plotter?
We had a pen plotter. Yeah.
Yeah, the pen plotter.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, yes.
That's so fun to watch. So fun to watch. Like plotters nowadays, right? It comes out like a Xerox. It's just a whole sheet spits out at
Yeah.
once. Back then, the sheet went back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. While the pen moved side to side, side to side, side to side. It was so fun to watch.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh yeah, it was. And then you would see like, you know, different pens, like the one, if I'm recalling this correctly, like it would, you know, plot with one pen, then it would plot with another pen.
Yeah, there was a
just
carousel
keep going back and forth, and
that the pens
right,
would
and there was a
load
carousel
up
that kind of like
for different weights or different colors. And our pens were felt tipped. I don't know what yours were, like, because the pen plot, the paper moves so fast, and we had inked everything up to that point by hand with rapidographs, right? And so you could not pull a rapidograph across a piece of paper with any speed, or you would just tear through the paper, right? So
exactly.
I was always like, really, a felt tip pen? And then I found out why. And that felt tip was not a sharp point at all. It was a very triangular, like prismatic point. And
it was wedged.
It was a wedge, but it was really hard, right? It couldn't be soft like a marker, but similar technology to a marker. It was like this ink-soaked felt tip. And man, that plotter flew, and it was so fun. Yeah.
Yeah, and then what was interesting is because then my story, after third year, I dropped out, ran out of cash, and I ended up working for a firm for 4 years. In that firm, we were using MicroStation? Yeah, MicroStation.
Mm-hmm.
Is that MicroStation 95? Is that?
Yeah.
I'm literally like, I'm saying MicroStation. I'm like, don't you mean Newforma? I'm like, no, Newforma is the project management.
There was MicroStation Triforma.
It was
back in the there was like their 3D modeling and rendering application that went along with MicroStation called Triforma.
So we used MicroStation. We did it was pre Triforma, but it was MicroStation 95.
Yeah,
that was what we were using, and so we were using that and drafting with that, and then the plotters became a slightly more sophisticated. You know, you started to get color plotters and all that other stuff. So that when I went back to school, fast forward 4 years later, and I'm, here's 99 when I'm back in school, and almost everybody was generating by computer using Photoshop.
Yeah, that went fast.
It was completely like opposite of the way that I left just 4 years earlier, where everything was sort of, at least through third year, we were, almost demanded to do everything by hand.
Yeah, there was.
And then fast forward.
Go ahead, finish up.
I was going to say, and so then fast forward to getting back, and everything is encouraged to be done by the computer. Yeah. And it was interesting because in a way I sort of saw, I'm just going to be judgmental about this, but I sort of saw a decline in the quality of the work that was being produced because people were just producing imagery. Think about like the old 9 Inch Nails, like album covers and stuff where there was just like heavy graphics overlaid and stuff like that.
Yep.
That was what it was. You almost could never tell exactly what the project was because there was so much graphic noise that it was just like, ooh, look at me, I'm edgy,
a lot of texture.
Kind of thing.
Yes.
A lot of texture and all that other stuff.
Yep.
And so that drove me on my thesis year. That actually drove me to do the entire thing. Yes, I, to this day, still feel like I regretted that decision, but I did my entire thesis by hand. I kind of like,
I drew a line in the sand. I wasn't going to cross
a lot of lines in the sand. Oh my gosh. Because
then
I also
with a stick.
I'm
quite literally
trying to I would probably say, so I did everything ink on vellum with some of the Pantone, like transfer, shading and all that other stuff. But I did everything in it. I think it was 20 feet long by, I'm looking at my wall right now to kind of judge, probably about 8 feet tall. And it was just several panels, but it was like a lot of information. It was like this one big, huge section because I did a military cemetery, but I did, like, so I had this really long section of like the entire site, but I did it at a legit scale. It was, I was just like, what? And to this day, I think to myself, what the hell was I thinking?
I remember being in studios. It depended on who was leading the studio, because there were some professors who would tolerate but penalize you for using the computer. There were other ones who were staunchly against it. And then there was another one, like the images that I sent you, where it was actually the structures professor, and he was all over it. He was like, yes, go crazy. And there were like three of us who used computers back then, right? So that was like a real catalyst moment for me, was that studio, because I think I've told the story on the podcast before, but that was the first time anyone in school used a laser cutter. And I used it to do a section model through the Waterloo Station in London by Grimshaw.
Okay.
And so that has these really cool, spatial trusses. They're not just like 2-dimensional trusses, they're 3-dimensional trusses. And they go up in this big ribbed kind of backbone arcing shape that's kind of an odd shape. And it was like, I remember drawing those sections in MicroStation, like you're talking about, trimming all those lines out of there. And because back then, like their published images were like postage stamp size on a page, right? Like you would get a monograph for Nicholas Grimshaw, and you would find a project so that because we all had case study projects, right? And we'd go down to the library, we'd go to the 5th floor of the library where there was the architecture section, and we would just try to find a book that we could then base a case study off of. And I immediately loved the structure, the cross section through the structure. You see the 2 trains for the different tracks that they were on. You see the loading phase. You can see the structure and the skin going over the top of it. And I was like, I got to do this. I didn't even think, how am I going to do this? I just said, I've got to do this. And that led me down the path of learning how to do a drawing and export it for some crazy laser cutting control software that was not CAD, right? It was something else. It was like CorelDRAW, I believe, at the time. Like, because what the laser cutter had a print driver that only worked out of CorelDRAW. And you had to do special layer setup. And it was like, this was all completely new to me. Like I had just started using the computer like the year before. And so the local service bureau got a laser cutter, and I was like, I'm going to learn how to use that, because I cannot figure out, I don't want to make these 3-dimensional truss models by hand. So I figured out a way to laser cut them. So the whole thing was out of chipboard, and my teacher loved that model so much that he never gave it back to me. And that's where that project of the 2 images that I sent you came from, which was completely like 3D truss based space frame spiral architecture. It was a radial plan. It had concrete walls with spiral 3D space trusses. It was really cool.
I kind of wish that I had. So we did a recycling center, and mine was kind of like a spiral, very not exactly like yours, but it was a spiral with spiral trusses, and it was kind of but mine was done all by hand. And people were like, you can't build, it's just like all these different things, like you can't build that in reality. It's just like, what's funny is the way that I built the trusses by hand kind of showed me that if I actually did want to build this thing, I probably could.
That's how building works. You break it down into its elements.
Exactly.
One component at a time.
Exactly.
And you put them in the right order, and you make the thing. Right.
And so what was funny is I remember a friend, and it was a Meyer building, and I can't remember. It was, do you recall that one Meyer building that's kind of like, it's white and it's got these like, kind of descending.
Really? Is it white?
Well, no.
Yeah.
But, these,
that really sets it apart from the rest of his buildings.
But it was kind of it was a radial fan.
Okay.
You're not recalling?
No,
it?
I'm not.
All right. Well, I'm gonna find it.
You got to find a name,
a link to it in the show night.
All right, cool.
But But it was like somebody had sent me a link to that, somebody from the school, and they're like, "Hey, you remember that project you did? I think, I think Meyer ripped you off." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm sure." Because
Yeah,
this was
that's
like
what he does.
this.
He goes,
Well, this was right after. This was kind of like right after Freedom Tower, and it was kind of like announced, and it was the one that before it became what it is. It was the one that was like
yeah.
slightly twisted, which actually was an architect who ripped off a student's like project.
My gosh.
Oh my god! And so who did that? Was that Foster who did that? That wasn't Foster, was it?
I remember a Liebeskind, but it wasn't twisting like you're talking about. But there was a whole scheme by Liebeskind. That's one that I recall.
Yeah, this was somebody completely different. But it was funny. It was like the principal in charge of that particular project happened to be on his jury, and it actually came out that whether or not they fully admitted to the fact that they ripped him off, it was pretty much like everybody's just like, "No, man, you ripped him off."
Well, Cormac, good ideas can come from anywhere.
Exactly. Which is actually kind of funny because there's a story about, very similarly, about Camden Yards, and one of our old principals that had just recently retired had done a student project that reused a good portion of the existing building that's right next to Camden Yards as part of the overall structure. And sure enough, he will live by the story that he swears that they ripped him off. Well, because the people who were involved with the project, here it was like after his thing, because and he's got this, he used to have this absolutely beautiful hand-built model of his project, which was a stadium, which was reusing the old warehouse building, which that's one of Camden Yard's charms, is reusing it and how it engages the site and everything else. And he will go to his grave claiming that they flat out ripped him off.
You call it a ripoff, they call it inspiration.
Yeah.
It's just a variation on a theme.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. Exactly.
Well, I'm still hurt that you laughed at my renderings from 1995. Those were badass.
You were very lucky that you're very lucky that I deleted and not sent to you the. Thank goodness for the grainy resolution. It was just, or something to that effect I was going to send you, and I was just like, no, that sounds too mean.
You're mean.
It's just haha.
Yeah.
Because haha will sound a lot nicer.
That was way nicer. Yeah. No, those are printed out on like an Epson inkjet printer too. It was like top of the line back then. You could tell because one image was like mostly purple, and it's because I had run out of the right color.
Well, you just tell them that you were trying to reminisce with like the old blue lines.
Yeah, I was.
But you wanted to do a purple line.
I was doing purple lines.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well.
Oh,
that's my story.
And you're sticking with it.
Yep.
It's so crazy, like, to actually think about like all of the kind of like weird technology that we were watching kind of get ushered in like the early stages of our career.
Mm-hmm.
That today now, I mean, to see how people have taken it out. Like, I remember we used to do like, we would write like, scripts for hotkey commands and things like that. But it wasn't scripts like, Rhino does, or
it wasn't visual programming, right?
Or Grasshopper.
Right.
Yeah, it wasn't any of that. No. It was just like, and then I sit there and I'm like, I look over the shoulder at people who are doing that now, and I look at them like, what is this? It's like, first of all, it's like, what is this kind of sorcery? And you just like, you see people like, they're like plugging, like, you just like, I'm watching them do it and I'm like, no concept. I mean, no concept.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's another form of sketching for people nowadays. I think we've talked about it in that context before, right? It's for us, it was actual sketching on trace paper or in a sketchbook, and then it went to the computer and it's gone to code now. And programming.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm excited for my retirement so somebody else can do all of this.
We're all excited for your retirement.
Let's see. That's going to be in what, they're
30 years?
2 decades?
I was going to say 30.
30. Ooh, wow. 30.
Well, you still got 20 years before you're actually, you've made it at all, right? Like
That's true.
You have to be entirely white haired by then, to be considered even.
Where your hands are all like,
crumpled up.
Exactly.
Great.
I want to do this.
Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Geary. Okay, so I have complained once before about this, but I would like to complain again.
Back to nature.
Architect magazine.
Here we go.
I would like to.
I can't even see it. It's paper thin.
Okay. There are.
Let's explain for the audio. Let's explain for the audio audience right now what Cormac is holding up to the screen.
I am holding up the Architect magazine, the Journal of the American Institute of Architects.
Right.
So here's what we get as a publication as a perk for our membership. And I'm holding it up sideways, pointing it towards the camera for all of the audio listeners to show Evan how very thin this magazine, this publication is. Now, you flip to the back page and it's 64 pages. 64 pages. Of those 64 pages, only 28 of them include true content that is not an ad.
Wow.
28 of 64 pages.
Wow.
Now, I did include the table of contents and
included. You cover the cover.
But I mean, I just really? I mean, this used to be my go-to of going online and looking at all of these. We're just talking about going and looking at these monographs and, looking at all of these different things. And so now you see these little teeny pictures and all this other stuff. It's little teeny pictures.
So you're saying we had a good
teeny
back then.
Text.
They were really
we had it good
crisp,
back then.
Black ink drawings on white paper. You could read them. They were legible, but they were small. But what you're saying is that today's drawings are even smaller.
Oh yeah. And I don't think, and I'm looking at something from the ecology school in Maine. And so, to me, it's a very lovely project that I would really like to actually see more of. So it probably means that I'm going to have to, exactly, because the article that is 3 pages long is broken up with an ad in the middle of it. It's almost like when you're sitting there and you're watching a YouTube video and, so there's an ad that starts playing in the middle of your video. That is exactly what's going on here. It's just seriously, how?
So if you could pay for an ad-free version, would you pay for an ad-free 28-page version of that magazine?
Can I get bigger pictures?
Can it be 64 pages but bigger pictures?
So I would say that the write-ups at say Arc Daily or Architect's Newspaper or Dezeen or any of these other ones, they have more engaging photography, and they don't necessarily have as much write-up as
size. The photography's not better, but it's bigger. It's on your screen.
It is bigger.
It's bigger.
It is definitely bigger.
Yeah.
But it is, in a way, it somewhat is better.
Got to be the same photographers,
some of them are just,
doesn't it?
I don't know.
I don't know either.
I'm just saying.
I'm asking if you would pay for an ad-free version, because I pay for an ad-free version of YouTube. It's the best money I spend. I don't want to watch any ads on. I see people watch YouTube and I'm like, how can you watch this crap when it's just full of ads? I don't understand how people can deal with that. And so I spend $15 a month for YouTube Premium so that I don't have to watch those ads, and my quality of life is better. And so would architecture periodicals follow suit? Is there a business model? Is there a business case to be made here?
So I'm sure that this is going to be in the mail for you.
Yeah.
Soon.
I'm sure. It probably showed up today.
If it's not already there.
Right.
But the title project, and it says Back to Nature, a case for rewilding. And I'm not even going to get started about the conversation about if you build a bunch of concrete planks and then just put trees on essentially planters, is that really rewilding? But that aside, that opinion aside, if you flip to it, it says images by Midjourney.
No way.
I shizzle you nuts.
I was not expecting that.
I wish you're not going to be able to see this because of my.
But I'm going to look in my magazine when it shows up.
The word right there that is blurry right now is Midjourney.
Wow.
I'm like, so not only are we getting a publication that's 64 pages long, that only has 28. Would you doubt it?
What's the byline on that article? Oh man, I would not be surprised. I mean, if they can't get enough income to pay for more content in a magazine, which means hiring writers, which means, like you've got to have a staff to produce a magazine. At least I think you do. then you've got to start figuring out where you can cut the costs.
Would you not okay, first of all, let's be honest. This is part of these are our fees that go to this.
Yeah.
I don't know how much money that they spend on this.
What's the percentage of an AIA
clearly not
membership
much
that goes to Architect Magazine? Right.
Yeah, clearly not much. I mean, and if you think about it, if of 64 pages and only 28 of them are actual content,
if you don't count the table of contents,
everything else is ads.
It's 40%. Yeah, 40% content.
Okay, so 60% ads, and they can't afford to get because they're ads, they can't afford to kick in a little bit more money to actually get a little bit more content and maybe some images that may or may not actually be from Midjourney. I don't really care if they're from Midjourney or not. I mean, I that sort of struck me as funny.
That is funny.
That was images by, and it does have a name. I'm not going to read off the name, but it's the person's name / Midjourney.
Okay.
Which means it's probably the person who was generating the imagery.
The prompt engineer.
And
the
prompt engineer. And so I honestly remember, this is me showing my age, but I remember going into a Barnes and Noble and going into the publication section and going to all the different architectural magazines. And I remember, and this was before Architect Magazine was part of, was the journal of the AIA. And it was, I think the journal of the AIA was Architecture Record at the time?
Yeah, I think so.
Which I don't know if that exists anymore or not.
I don't think so.
But in Architect Magazine was I would go to that one because that one had a lot more interesting articles. They had a lot more imagery. They had things that would be the one that I would buy to go and clip out pictures and let other stuff and just,
put them in a binder.
Put them in a binder and just use them as my little mental Rolodex of things. Or I would just have because before we moved here, which I'm sure you probably might have done the same thing, but before we moved here, my wife was like, can we finally purge all of your magazines?
Of your crap.
I think I had, because I also had stuff from my old boss who was throwing things out. I'm like, don't throw them out. I want them. And I grabbed probably about at least a good decade and a half of stuff from him.
Oh, wow.
and then had another decade and a half worth of stuff. So I had at least 3.5 decades worth of every publication: Progressive Architecture, Architect Magazine, Architecture Record, probably splashed in a few Architectural Digests. And to be quite honest with you, if you go to Architectural Digest now, that's actually a far more competent publication than what we get. You know, they've far more, captivating imagery.
There's a bigger market.
And content.
There's a bigger market for interiors than there is for architecture. Bigger audience.
Well, yeah. You know, what's funny is like, it was Architectural Digest. Yeah, that's the one I'm thinking of. It was Architectural Digest that kind of introduced me to like a handful of different architects that I'd never heard of in my life. It's just like, who is this Robert A.M. Stern fellow? It was literally, I was like, who the hell is this guy? And I was just like, this guy's good. People like, I think I heard Gwathmey for the first time, Alexander Gorlin, all these different people who, they had like Fifth Avenue type, apartments and a lot of like, really cool interiors and stuff. Mm-hmm. But it was like, it's like, okay, now I started to like put together, and I kind of still appreciate the magazine for the fact that, we were always taught like it's architecture, it's the shell, it's like, and then it's just like, oh, give that to somebody else to do like the interiors and stuff.
Right.
And now as you and I've like kind of grown in our careers and stuff, I can't see one without the other. I can't divorce one from the other. I mean, that's what we do, right? Yep. I mean, that's good, competent architecture is when you like rely on both.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So my wife told me, she's like, the mail came in and she's like, I left your
pamphlet.
She's like, I left your magazine on the front table. There's, right, it was come in, we've got an entry table. And so she left it there, and I'm just like, oh yeah. And so I went in and I got it, and I pick it up, and it's just like, whoa, it's just like so light. It's just like, really
disappointing.
Like,
so disappointing.
It's just like, I long for like the issues that have like Progressive Architecture Awards or Residential Architecture Awards or all of these other,
right?
Something that actually has a little bit more meat to it, because otherwise, I mean, 3 pages for the ecology school, and it's literally 2 thin columns of actual text, and then a bunch of little teeny pictures of the actual thing. It's like, I would actually really love to learn a little bit more about that. So now I'm going to have to go to Arc Daily or Architecture Newspaper or, one of these other ones to actually find out more information about it from somebody other than the people, my own professional.
All that Architect Magazine is a vehicle. And I apologize in advance to the people who work on the story part of Architect Magazine and who actually see it as something different than I do. But it is a vehicle to get building product manufacturers ads in front of architects. And this magazine is just secondary to that as far as the articles go.
And I even included a 4-page spread for continuing ed. But for you to get any credits for this continuing ed, you do actually have to go to a website. What's the point in here?
So to do what? Is that to like take a quiz, or is that to like, so you have to get your name captured so that you become a sales lead, or both?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. I mean, that's my point, is like, there's so many things it feels like we've complained about NCARB on here recently because of the fee hike. The AIA is not cheap to be a member of. And they're still constantly shoving this ad stuff in our face because they're looking for outside revenue always. Like it's just kind of crazy making that we spend the amount of money we spend for membership. And you said it, this is a perk of membership. A membership benefit is that you get this subscription, which is really just a way to get junk mail in your mailbox.
Yeah, exactly. I would much rather like get mailers, or I would even sign up for you know me and my weird addiction to CEUs, but I mean, I signed up for people that I know are going to give me quality information for, I don't know, I do a lot of like flat roofs or plaza decks or things like that that need something like a Hydrotech or something.
But
Not a
Cormac,
sponsor,
that's
but
you looking for what you need. And this is the
right.
other way around. This is like, we are going to blanket mail everybody and hope that
And tell you
some
what you need.
small percentage of those people will respond. It is exactly the opposite model. It doesn't make sense
Right.
to me. And yet it persists. I just don't understand how that line
Yeah.
item is still in so many people's budget on the manufacturing
If,
side.
to be quite honest with you, to if they would do something, is it, it's, I think it's Arc Daily, that if you go to, if you're like looking at a project and you're kind of like reading some of their articles and you're like flipping through, at the very bottom, they actually like have lists of manufacturers
I'm
that
sure.
were involved on this.
Right.
I would even do like go so far as to say, you know, hey, I'd like to have like maybe an interactive page where I could click on a project and I'm clicking on what manufacturer did they use for their glazing? What manufacturer did they use for their expansion joints? What do you know, all of these different things. And you just like click on it and it
Yeah.
pops up and then it gives you like, this was blah, blah, blah. And it's blah, blah, blah. And you can go to this website and find more information about it. I mean, at least make it somewhat damn useful instead of just giving us splash pages of, you know, finding links to other things. Do away with this altogether. Don't send me paper. Send me a web, what is it? What is the, um, I'm blanking on the like online, like, you know, publication where you can
Oh, like
like
issue.
flip through issue. Thank you. Issue. I don't know literally why I blanked on that one, but you know, and issue is pretty interactive, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if like there's been several that I've gone to that can create like something very interactive too.
Right.
And there's just like a little dot that can like, you know,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
you know,
Something to get
and
your
it's just like,
attention.
ooh, I'll click on that dot.
Right.
Exactly. And it's like, ooh, I'll click on that dot and see what it is. And
Like a kid. What's that? Squirrel.
but at least it's something that's giving me some valuable information. I was okay. I've read the project. I would really love to. So it's like I'm looking at this cover of Architect Magazine. I'm like, oh, you know, this very kind of like green roof plaza kind of thing going on.
You can get that
It's
in
actually
Midjourney.
kind of amazing. Well, exactly. But I mean, I was just like, okay, this is really kind of cool. If I did something like that, what I would want to know is how did they achieve that? What are the materials that they used to do this? What are the kind of detailings, or at least the manufacturer? Who's the right person to ask to go in to try to accomplish that?
Right.
You know, because again, that goes back to the whole conversation that we had about Midjourney can create all of this imagery all they want to. And there's like some architect out there. There was a more recent article that I was just reading, and I blanked on the name of the article and that, but he was basically saying that AI can help us kind of like regain our connection to design
Right. Right. I
and,
remember. Yeah.
you
I
know,
saw something about that too. You must have sent that
yeah,
to me, but yeah,
and
it was like, it can reconnect us to like high design because everything, all the buildings have gotten so dumb and so dumbed down and stripped,
yeah.
basically.
And it was just like, you, AI can help you create images, but again, AI can't help you build squat. And
Unbuildable.
you're still going to have to
Yeah.
you're still going to have to figure all of that out.
Right.
And if you
That's what an
can't,
architect's going to
that's
be.
where
That's where your value is.
exactly. Is it just architectural draftsman, a detailer?
Figuring it out. The figuring it out part. Yeah, I mean,
Isn't
they in text, you know, there's a lot of talk about the hallucination that happens with ChatGPT. It'll cite authors of different things. It's like that's not even a real person, right? And it's like, and you can say
right,
that, oh, this isn't the author of that. It's like, oh, you're right. I'm so sorry. And then it say this is the
yeah,
real author of that. And I think that it does the same thing with imagery, right? It is basically
right,
daydreaming up imagery, it's putting pixels next to other
Yeah.
pixels because that's what it sees happen most often. And so
Right. Right.
because of all the images that it's been trained on. And there's some really amazing outcomes that come out of that. And at the same time, it's like you see buildings made out of feathers and you see stained glass curving in 8 different directions. And it's like, and how? Right? I mean,
Exactly.
there's a friend of mine posted some Mid-Journey images on LinkedIn where he was reimagining like medieval glass shower enclosures because he's a glass guy
Mhm.
and he loves shower glass.
Right.
That's what he specializes in. And so he like did this deep dive down, what could a medieval version of a glass shower have been like? And they're wild, right? And I said my response was like, please send cost estimates, today. That's what I want to see next. I want to see how much these things cost because like you can daydream as much as you want. I mean, this is literally going back to school. There was no gravity.
Oh yeah.
There was no client. There
Right.
was not a really well-defined program a lot of times. There was so many things that were just like, okay, sure. That's what it is now. And it is.
Right.
At the same time, can that be inspiring? Absolutely. Can it actually be built all the time? No way. Of course not.
So I'll show you this cover again. For the audio listeners, I am holding up the Architect magazine,
Back
and
to
it
nature.
shows these wonderful concrete planks that are these big cantilevers, and
it's kind of like falling water,
all of this other stuff.
Kind of Ray Cappy look, right? It's like these really heavily cantilevered decks, concrete decks.
But it's fully these
vegetated.
thin concrete decks, and it's fully vegetated.
Right.
And I know because I've been dealing with vegetation over a structured roof, and the depth that you need for, like, say, a tree root bulb and all of that other stuff are not achieved in what I'm seeing here.
You need a better
You are
engineer,
not going to be able
Cormac.
to do this.
Give me a break.
You mean nature? Nature who's going to tell me, if I want I'm looking at these are easily like, a 20-foot tall tree that's going to tell me, the root system that it's going to need to basically stand up. Because I don't see any planters here. I mean, it is just like full green, full wild, full, I mean, the whole, like, thing is the case for rewilding.
It made it
okay,
to the
you
cover.
can rewild all you want to.
It's the cover shot, man.
Exactly.
It
is.
Must work. It must be real.
It does. And that's the thing that I want to, like, every time an architect says, oh, AI is going to replace us.
I'm just going to carry this magazine around with me.
To carry this around, just show it to people and say, is it? Because do you think AI figured out how to make all of this work?
Well, let's bring this back. Let's bring this back to where we started the episode with your response to my images.
There you go. There's my haha response to this one too.
So what you're saying is that my renderings as a third-year architecture student weren't any better than a Mid-Journey image today. Just as buildable.
No,
I'm sure it wasn't buildable at all. Like what I drew.
It's funny is that I bet yours were probably more built.
It probably was.
You went through this whole truss system and everything else, and at least sort of thought through all of the.
Well, it was fully 3-dimensional. Yeah, that's just a 2D.
There you go.
Image. So
it is quite something. So yes, welcome back to school.